Namaste and a very warm welcome. I am Sia Kurd and it is my honor to welcome you all to the 5th Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture organized by Meenakshi Foundation for Indic Studies. On this special occasion, we are privileged to have Dr. Meenakshi Jain, Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe, and the Vice Chancellor of Gokhale Institute for Politics and Economics, Dr. Dash. I would also like to welcome our mentors, special invitees, scholars, faculty members, and students from colleges across Pune, and each one of you present here. As we begin today's evening, I would request everyone to please put their phones on silent mode. And I request Dr. Meenakshi Jain, Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe, and Dr. Dash to kindly come forward to light the lamp. In the Indian tradition, a lamp signifies knowledge, positivity, and blessings. May this light be our guide in the journey of seeking knowledge. Meenakshi Foundation for Indic Studies is an organization that attempts to provide a Bharatiya alternative to the entrenched socio-political, religio-spiritual, and historical narrative prominent in academia today, and incorporates contextual, cultural, and geographical specificities of the Indian realities. It is primarily a forum that hosts articles, special features, in-depth interviews, analysis from domain scholars, and conducts courses, workshops, lectures, dialogues, and study circles. With a firm belief in India's ever-inquisitive tradition and its respect for diversity, we at Meenakshi Foundation for Indic Studies wish to contribute to the larger discourse on understanding India. Each year, the Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture is organized on 16 January to mark the death anniversary and pay tribute to the exemplary, scholarly, and visionary work of Justice Mahadev Govind Ranade. His ideas on economy, history, society, and national development continue to be relevant even today. We at MFIS draw a great deal of inspiration from his works and ideas. And the purpose of establishing this memorial lecture is to keep the same zeal, dedication alive. This 5th Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture is significant in many ways. Today, we mark the 125th death anniversary of Justice Ranade. At this special venue, Justice Ranade and Gopal Krishna Gokhale shared a profound mentor-protege relationship, with Ranade serving as Gokhale's spiritual and intellectual guide, influencing his dedication in social and economic reform. Today, having Gokhale Institute as our venue partner for this lecture and Meenakshi ma'am as our keynote speaker is like a Triveni Sangam for us. For the further program, I would like to call upon Dr. Sharayu Bhalerao, a core member of MFIS, to introduce our dignitaries.
Today, it is a great honor to privilege to welcome Padma Shri Dr. Meenakshi Jain, an eminent historian and distinguished scholar whose work has made a significant contribution to the study of Indian history, culture, and civilization. Dr. Meenakshi Jain academic interests lie in the cultural and religious developments of Indian history, areas in which she has produced a rich body of scholarly work. Her research is known for its clarity and careful engagement with historian resources, and it has played an important role in broadening contemporary discussion on India's past. In recognition of her outstanding scholarship, Dr. Jain has been awarded several senior fellowships, including those from the Prime Minister Museum and Library and the Indian Council of Social Science Research in 2020. The Government of India honored her with a Padma Shri for her distinguished contribution to literature and education. Her contributions were further recognized in 2025 when she was nominated to the Upper House of Parliament. Dr. Jain is the author of several influential books. Her recent work included Raja Bhoja Paramara, Remembering the Scholar King, The British Makeover of India, a two-part study examination, the transformation and the indigenous education, languages and the institutions. Vishwanath Rises and Rises, The Story of Eternal Kashi and the Hindus of Hindustan. Her earlier publications, such as Vasudeva Krishna and Mathura, Fight of Deities and Rebirth of Temples, The Battle of Rama and Sati Vigilantes, Baptist missionaries and the changing colonial discourse have had a lasting impact on historical scholarship. Through her writings, Dr. Meenakshi Jain has consistently sought to illuminate lesser explored aspects of Indian history and to promote and inform evidence-based understanding of the civilization heritage. We are indeed honored to have her with us today. Please join me in a warmly welcome Padma Shri Dr. Meenakshi Jain. I request Uttara Ranade ma'am to felicitate Dr. Meenakshi Jain madam. Thank you, madam. Our another guest of this evening to introduce Professor Umakanta Das, a distinguished academician, visionary administrator, and an eminent public policy expert. Professor Das currently serves as the Vice Chancellor of the Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, a premier institution known for its legacy and excellence in economics, public policy, and the social sciences. Prior to this, he was the director of RBI chairperson at the Institute of Rural Management Anand, that is IRMA. Professor Das is internationally recognized for his pioneering work in health economics, public policy, and the development studies. His research, supported by global organizations such as WHO, DFID, the Rockefeller Foundation, and Access Health International, has significantly contributed to the advancing equity, efficiency, and risk protection in health system across several countries in Asia and Africa. He has authored over 90 publications in leading international journals and has mentored 17 doctoral scholars, many of whom are now accomplished academics and research. Beyond academia, Professor Das has played a vital role in the policy formulation and governance, serving on expert committee for various ministries of the Government of India and national advisory bodies such as the NTAGI. He also serves on the governing boards of several prestigious institutions. In recognition of his exceptional contribution, Professor Das has received numerous honors, including the AIMA Keval Nohria Award for Academic Leadership in 2024 and the LVS Public Policy Lifetime Achievement Award 2025. I request to Akshay Ranade sir to felicitate Dr. Professor Das. Thank you, sir. The next guest for the today evening is Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe, a distinguished scholar of international relations and eminent academic whose work has made a significant contribution to the study of foreign policy, security studies, and the international affairs in India. Dr. Sahasrabuddhe is a professor of international relations in the Department of Civics and Politics at the University of Mumbai. With decades of experience in teaching and research, she has been deeply engaged in academic and policy-oriented scholarships. Her work is known for combining strong theoretical foundations with practical insights, particularly in the areas of India's foreign and security policies. Beyond the university classroom, Dr. Sahasrabuddhe has contributed extensively to professional military education. She is a visiting instructor and panel evaluator at the Naval War College, Goa, and has also served a visiting instructor in the Army War College. These roles reflect the relevance of scholarship to India's strategic and defense institutions. Her research interests India's foreign and security policies, regionalism, and the international relations theory. She has authored over 30 scholarly articles in edited volumes and reputed journals. Among her major publications is the co-authored Marathi book आंतरराष्ट्रीय संबंध शीतयुद्धोत्तर व जागतिकरणाचे राजकारण and the edited volume Emerging Issues in India's External Relation. I request Samhita Ranade Madam to felicitate Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe Madam. Thank you, Madam. Now I request to Sia for the further responsibilities. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. I would now request Dr. Akshay Ranade to deliver the welcome address and set the stage for today's lecture.
Hello, good evening, everyone. At the outset, I first pay my tributes to Justice Mahadev Govinda Ranade, whose death anniversary is what we are remembering today. This is also an extremely special occasion because this is the completion of 125th anniversary of Justice Mahadev Govinda Ranade. On the behalf of Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies, I also welcome Dr. Meenakshi Jain. We are indeed honored that she accepted our invitation to come with us and spend time to discuss some of her crucial works, which is making a lot of buzz now, but something which also is a reflection of her scholarship over the years. I also welcome Dr. Umakant Das sir. In fact, I am thankful that we are hosting this along with Gokhale Institute. Sia just mentioned the long relationship, which sort of transcends just academic relationship between Gokhale and Ranade. And it's all essentially a fortuitous evening for us that we are doing it along with Gokhale Institute. I'm also welcome Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe. She is traveling all the way from Mumbai here. I've known ma'am for a long time. She has been my guide and mentor for long years, and I'm really happy that she is here today. She has been a mentor for Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies since day one, and it's indeed honor for us that she has come here today. I also want to thank the other mentors, Dr. Manjusha Gokhale and Dr. Prasad Joshi sir. Both of them, again, are mentors of Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies. All of them have guided our journey, the small journey that we have had so far, and we hope that their mentorship and blessings continue henceforth also. Like I said, this is a fortuitous evening, and one of the things that propelled us to have Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture was the thought behind the man as we speak. See, what I personally think that memorial lectures are not just nostalgia. It's not something just to remember what happened, but it is something which serves a very pertinent purpose even today. And something that, a purpose that I think which Justice Ranade's life embodied throughout his career. First as a student, because he started writing very early, later on reflecting on society and politics, and also through his judgments, which more or less are not studied extensively. So when we were contemplating on how to build Mimamsa Foundation's academic structure, something that we thought is central to whatever we are going to do was the spirit of not only national awakening, but what is the purpose behind that national awakening. It is not an empty idea, it is not an empty shell that we are talking about national awakening. It must serve certain purpose. And I think when we were reading a lot about Justice Ranade, we found that purpose in his writings. In many ways, of course, when we study political science, the discussions on modernity are fairly controversial. It's not very easy to define or contextualize modernity. But if at all we were to think about contemporary Indian modernity, because Indian modernity, I believe, predates colonial era. But if we were to talk about contemporary Indian modernity, I think it was embodied in Ranade's thoughts, which were rooted in Indian civilizational ethos, something which is not extensively probed, but we're also equally forward-looking. Sometimes we make a mistake of locating Justice Ranade only in the discussions around colonial period, but some of his writings, some of his reflections have relevance much beyond colonial space and are equally relevant today. So when we were thinking about how to sort of look at our own space where we want to sort of collectively research on India, we thought that some of the purpose and some of the ideas which Ranade reflected will serve as a guiding light for all of us. This doesn't have to say that everything which is said or written by him has to be applied today. That is a false logic. But the purpose and the ideas that guided his mission is something that we want to incorporate. And if we are able to do it partially also, I think it will be a great success. With that idea, we thought of institutionalizing Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture. He was an historian. He was economist, he was also a jurist, he was a social reformer. All those disciplines is something which we want to sort of research and study. So all these things are sort of in one man, and we thought that this is a great guiding force for all of us. The other reason that we thought we would institutionalize this is over the years, either the message which Ranade was trying to say got lost, or was appropriated by a peculiar ideological framework, which sort of took away the core essence of what Justice Ranade meant. And through our, not just memorial lectures as a way to congregate and collectively ponder, but also beyond that, we think that we have to rescue some of the ideological ghettos from the work of our national leaders and sort of look at them fairly objectively. And that is one of the reasons why we institutionalized Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture. We have been fortunate that this is the 5th edition of the lecture, but we are fortunate that some of the real stalwarts who have contributed to this lecture have been, for instance, someone like Dr. Shamika Ravi. She is economic advisor to PM. We have had Dr. Avinash Sapekar, who is heading one of the very strong institutions built by Ranade, which is Granth Tejat Samstha. We also had Pankaj Jha. We also, the first edition was by Additional Solicitor General Vikramjit Banerjee, and now for the 5th edition we have Dr. Meenakshi Jain, again where scholarship and purpose sort of congregate at one point. So it could not have been any better for us. Like I said, it's 125th year. It's all see, the years after a point just serve a purpose. It's just a symbol. 125 years is obviously just a symbol. It is it is not less or more significant than, let's say, 126th. But because we need an occasion to have something collectively to ponder on, we thought it's a great opportunity for us to come together. And we requested Meenakshi Jain, ma'am. She was very happy to come. So I again want to thank ma'am for that. With that, I want to sort of rest my talk. But the only thing that I'll sort of conclude with is this idea sort of goes beyond just remembering the works, but also is to institutionalize and make certain things applicable to our work as well, and hope we will be able to do it at least to a certain extent. With that, I want to thank you and welcome once again, ma'am.
Thank you, sir. MFIS has been working for the cause of Indic inquiry for the past 6 years now, and we would like to share a small glimpse of our activities and initiatives with all of you. For the same, I would request all the dignitaries to kindly join us in the audience.
Bharat is one of the world's oldest living civilizations with a rich and continuous tradition of knowledge, philosophy, science, and social thought. Yet, much of how India is studied and understood today has been shaped by external narratives. The Mimamsa Foundation for Indic Studies, MFIS, is an independent, non-political research forum dedicated to the serious and systematic study of India, its civilization, and its contemporary challenges. Founded in 2020, MFIS has since then focused on addressing the intellectual gaps created by colonial and post-colonial narratives by fostering research and discussions rooted in India's own civilizational experience categories of thought, and knowledge traditions. Through this effort, MFIS seeks to move beyond externally imposed frameworks and enable a deeper, more nuanced understanding of India, one that emerges from within its own philosophical, historical, and cultural contexts. But Mimamsa comes from Indian philosophical tradition and signifies deep inquiry, reflection, and critical investigation. It represents a distinctly Indian way of engaging with knowledge, one that values questioning, debate, and reasoned analysis while remaining rooted in lived reality. This spirit of Mimamsa forms the intellectual foundation of MFIS. To enable such holistic inquiry, MFIS works through a distinctive four-pillared framework that reflects the integrated nature of Indian civilization. These four pillars are Vijnana, India's scientific, mathematical and technical traditions; Darshana, philosophy, metaphysics, ethics and spiritual inquiry; Itihasa, history, narratives, memory and civilizational continuity; and Sambhasha, dialogue on society, polity, economics and contemporary issues. Together, these four pillars guide MFIS's research, discussions and academic engagement. MFIS translates inquiry into action through various vibrant activities. It publishes research articles and special series which deal with interdisciplinary researches and analysis by domain experts across the four pillars. Through Mimamsa perspectives, dialogues and conversations, it engages with global thinkers on culture and ideas that contribute to a credible discourse on India. From ancient Indian argumentative tradition, ancient Indian economy to focused thematic workshops, these are the structured online and offline programs specifically designed to build scholarly skills and rooted perspectives. Under Indic Cafe, Study Circle is the flagship program of MFIS. It is an interactive forum where young scholars and students engage in dialogue, debate and collective learning. Foundation Day lectures are the talks by leading academicians and eminent scholars reflecting on core themes of Indic inquiry such as history, philosophy and civilizational studies. Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture is an annual lecture honoring Justice Mahadev Govind Ranade, scholar, reformer and thinker, highlighting ideas on justice, society and national development. These activities nurture both depth of scholarship and a culture of thoughtful engagement. At MFIS, invites students, scholars and seekers of knowledge to be part of this intellectual journey. Come, join us in inquiring deeply and in thinking independently and contribute your voice to understand India through an authentic Indic lens.
To know more about our work and be part of this journey, we humbly request you to visit our website on mfisonline.org. The topic for today's lecture is Colonial Reset, How British Rule Undermined India's Indigenous Institutions. This topic is particularly significant in a time where we need to reform and restructure our institutions to align with our realities and future trajectories. I would now like to invite Dr. Jain to deliver her remarks. We are all eagerly waiting to hear from you.
Namaskar everyone. I'm honored and privileged to be invited to present the Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture. I salute the work that is being done by the Meenakshi Foundation. Keeping the time factor in mind, I will immediately begin my talk for today. Actually, I'm feeling very humble standing here before you in the city of Pune. In the morning, I went to Deccan College, and though I had a very good idea of the stalwarts who had worked in that college and how they had advanced the frontiers of Indian knowledge, keeping in mind the authentic traditions. But it was a real eye-opener to go to Tilak's room to see the immense work that is being done on the Sanskrit dictionary. Sitting away from Pune, one cannot visualize the grand effort that has been made in the past and that is continuing to be made by the new generation of scholars at Deccan College. So, having gone there, it is with great courage that I'm trying to talk to you because I feel so small when I compare my visit in the morning. One or two things that I want to say before I start my talk. What is the theme of my work so far? And how is it relevant today? The theme of my work for the last almost 2 decades has been to understand Indian history through Indian eyes, to write Indian history through indigenous sources, and to brush away the history that has been imposed on us by certain outside forces and certain groups inside, which all had an objective to diminish us and diminish our past and to make us smaller people. Now we are talking about the British role. You know, we were taught when we were in school that the British, there was no India before the British came. And the British unified the country. Now when you start looking at the indigenous sources, you find in the Atharvaved what is called the Prithvi Sukta. And that has been described as the first national song in the world. It is very difficult to date ancient texts because there is no method of actually accurately dating them, though efforts are being made in that direction. But we know that the Atharvaved can be dated several centuries before Common Era. So a work that has been composed 3,000 or 4,000 years ago, it's very difficult to say, but it talks about this land. It talks about the geography of this land. It talks about the flora, fauna. It talks about sabhas, samitis, all the defining features of our civilization which continued down the centuries. It is mentioned in the Prithvi Sukta. Then the British say that we united India. Kautilya in the Arthashastra was very clear that from the Himalayas to the seas, from east to west, there should be one ruler. It was not possible, given the limited means of communication, etc., to have the whole country under one ruler. There were times when it was attempted, but that was not the ideal also. Culturally, civilizationally, philosophically, the whole of this land was viewed as one land. Now, the other thing that we are told, you know, the British modernized India. They gave you telegraph, railways. But can you tell me why they did that? The British were an outside agency and their aim was to extract from India. So they laid down the railways, they gave telegraph, because that enabled them to rush their forces to any part of India which was under revolt in the shortest time possible. So this British mapping of India was not done as a great favor to us. It was done to prolong their stay in India. You know, the first map of India was prepared by James Renal. He was the first Surveyor General of India, and he mapped every corner of India. Every river, every mountain, what was the produce that was being grown in which part of the country, because they had to extract. And James Prinsep, he's very well known. He wrote this book, Banaras Illustrated, in which there are maps, because there was a British cantonment nearby, so every lane is marked in that map. Because if you have to move an army, you cannot go through small lanes. So you have to know the highways, the main ways. So the point that I'm making is that decolonization of our historical narrative is very important if we want to understand our history in the true sense. What has been taught to us, it was certainly taught to me when I was in college and much later, was that you were not a nation and the British gifted you this civilization. When I began to study the texts and the British role in mapping, then I realized that it is a selfish motive of a colonial power. It is designed to perpetuate and prolong their rule in India, where they thought that they would stay forever. And it's ironic that within 100 years of the great 1857 uprising, they were out of this country. Now, we are going to discuss today the British in a role in subverting indigenous judicial institutions and indigenous educational institutions. Now, when I start, I will, for the sake of convenience, I'll divide the talk into two parts. The first part, I will discuss the judicial institutions, and the second part, the educational institutions. Now, when the East India Company came to India, it came as a trading company. And what happened in England at that time was that the lords, the nobility, it was the rule that the eldest son would inherit the title, the land, the wealth, etc. So what happened to a family which had 2-3 sons? The eldest one would get everything, and the second and third sons would be left paupers. So this is when the nobility or the feudal class in England, they decided that the way to become rich for their younger sons was to get employment in the East India Company. The East India Company had started their advent into India, and there was no method by which they had to recruit. So the thing was that if a director of the East India Company was your friend, you could say, please send my son to India. So India was the gateway for the second, third sons of feudal classes or the lords to acquire wealth quickly. So the people, early Englishmen who came to India, they did not come with a formal education, and they came when they were in their teens. They had not completed their study in England, and they were young boys. Why I'm giving this background is because these young boys with no formal education who had come to India to get rich fast, they wrote very perceptive accounts of India. And 5 of those accounts that they wrote have survived, and they're very helpful to us as historians. Is it not? Acha. Were you comfortable hearing what I was saying? There's no problem? ठीक है. Okay. But was it recorded properly?
Yes.
Okay. Is it clear now? So what happens that these 5 authors whose works have survived. We don't know how many were lost, but these 5 have survived by young officials of the East India Company with no full education, and they write something which is really remarkable. They all write that for the 1,000 years or the 800 years that India was under Mongol rule. They use the word Mongol rule. The Mongols did not touch the indigenous education and judicial institutions. They said that Mongol rule was confined to the important cities, and the Mongols were only interested in getting land revenue from the peasants, because the revenue was the main source of the income of the state. So they say that in large parts of the country, the native judicial and educational institutions survived without any interference by the medieval state. And this is the opening from which we begin our study. For the entire medieval period, according to these accounts that were written by early Englishmen, they say that indigenous institutions were left untouched largely by the medieval state. The medieval state said, if you have any problem with a particular case, you come to us. Otherwise, we will not interfere, because they were not interested. So this is the background to the lecture today. Now, this story of judicial interference or the British interference is a story of the way to hell is paved with good intentions. The British thought something and they ended up doing something very different. How did the story start? You know, the Mughal emperor had become very weak, and he could not resist the pressure of any important power. So in 1765, the weak Mughal emperor surrendered to the demand of the East India Company that they hand over the task of revenue collection to the East India Company. Because the East India Company was also interested in revenue collection, the Mughal state was also interested in revenue collection. So in 1765, the Mughal emperor gave the right of Diwani to the East India Company. Diwani meant 2 responsibilities. First, they had to collect revenue, and the second, they had to provide the judicial institutions. Because, you know, when you collect revenue, there will be always some complaint or the other, so you need to have a judicial apparatus. Have you understood what I'm saying? So in 1765, the weak Mughal governor, the weak Mughal emperor, gave the East India Company the right to collect revenue, and with it judicial responsibility in the 3 provinces of Bengal, Bihar, Orissa. Because we all know that the East India Company began its rule in these 3 areas. Now, so the British got this responsibility, and in a very benign spirit, they said, we will administer Hindu laws to the Hindus. All right. They never said we will impose our laws. They said we will implement Hindu laws to the Hindus. But the point is, what were Hindu laws? They didn't know anything. They didn't know what were the Hindu laws, who was going to implement. So they invited 12 priests in Calcutta to come to Fort William, which was the headquarters of the British, and prepare a digest from the Dharma Shastras. Now, how did the British know that the Hindu law is in the Dharma Shastras? We don't know. So this is a very sorry story that the British collect 12 Pandits, and they say, you come here and you prepare a digest of Hindu laws. These 12 Pandits, they wrote what they knew. They had not studied. 10 of them had not studied the Dharma Shastras. And they wrote a compilation. They did not know Persian. They did not know English. So they dictated what they understood in Bangla. Now, the East India Company obviously could not enforce laws written in Bangla. So, those laws that were translated in Bangla were translated by the East India Company officials into Persian, and third translation into English. So you can imagine how defective this whole system was, that text is orally recited in Bangla, then it is given in Persian, and then it is given in English. So in every translation, can you imagine the errors that would have occurred? You know, if I'm speaking in Hindi and I want that text to be translated into English, that is just one language difference, even then there will be so many errors. So this final translation into English was called a Code of Gentoo Laws. All right. Now, so what was the problems? How did they decide that the Hindu laws are contained in the Dharma Shastras? The Englishmen, they failed to understand that the Dharma Shastras were actually philosophical and intellectual discourses. The Dharma Shastras represented philosophical and intellectual discourses, and they were a vast collection of texts and commentaries. So that was one thing. Then the Englishmen thought that the Dharma Shastras can be applied all over the country to all the Hindus without any problem. You know, like in England, they could apply the ecclesiastic or religious law to everybody. But they failed to recognize that from ancient times, the sources of law in India were many. The jatis had their own laws, the villages had their own laws, the guilds had their own laws, castes had their own laws. So this tradition that every community, every group, every village is entitled to have its own laws, and these will be followed, was universally accepted, and it was the norm. We do not come across any reference to Dharma Shastras being implemented from Kashmir to Kanyakumari. So what was, it was that the lawgiver, and you know, there are texts written, they say that the established custom of those who do not know the Vedas, that established custom is authoritative for them. So there is no attempt at uniformly applying a legal system all over the country in the Indian tradition. The customs of every caste, every community, every guild, every region. Bodhyayan, who wrote in the 2nd century, he wrote that in the south there are 5 practices that are different from the north, and one of them is marriage among customs. So this tradition of marriage among customs is recorded more than 2,500 years ago, and we know that practice prevails even till today in large parts of South India. I'm sure you're aware of it, marriages between cousins. So this was one of the major problems that the British created for us. They assumed that they will have one law which has been translated from Bangla to Persian to English, and they will impose that law all over the country. So the people were not prepared for this. And the second thing that the British said was that, you know, when we decide a case, we must have the precedent. Precedent means what was the verdict given on a particular case in the past, you know. But that is also not in the Indian tradition, because in the Indian tradition, the Dharma Shastras never showed any concern for precedent. For them, uniformity was not between similar cases, but with dharma as it was comprehended in each case. So, according to the Hindu tradition, every individual had a unique dharma, and a unique set of responsibilities. So, and the Dharma Shastras were not static. They went on changing according to the need of the time. So, the features about Indian Dharma Shastras or the Indian laws, they were elastic. They went on changing according to the need of the times, and they respected local customs and traditions. There are so many texts which say that the dharma of a Shudra is the dharma for them. The dharma of a woman is a dharma for them. We don't come across any evidence throughout the medieval period that talk about uniformity. So this is the first text that the British tried to impose all over India, and it created a whole lot of problems. That is the Code of Gentoo Laws. There were two other texts that were translated in this period, which I would like to mention. There were many others, but shortage of time. One is the Manusmriti. They translated the Manusmriti, and the other was a digest on Hindu laws of contracts and succession. So this British attempt to impose these texts all over the country faced great resistance in the South. So in the South, the British company officials themselves said that we don't recognize these laws. These laws are not implemented over here, and you are trying to impose a northern view and northern school on us. So the British contribution to the interference in the judiciary was to create north-south divide, Brahmin, non-Brahmin divide, Shastric and customary laws divide among them. Now, while this was creating divisions, there were some company officials outside Bengal presidency, particularly in Madras presidency. And they said that the Indian system of giving justice is based on the panchayat. The panchayat is a system that gives justice free of cost. There is no backlog. And if a village has 10 cases, it can establish 10 panchayats. And they said that this panchayat system, 99% of the times, the judgment given by a panchayat is not challenged, because the people who have received that judgment, they say that it is the correct judgment. So Thomas Munro, who was the governor of Madras presidency, he said we must have native judges and native institutions like village panchayats. He said the panchayat is the only mode of trial that is generally popular. And he said no Indian thinks that justice has been done where panchayat is not adopted. So this was almost across the length and breadth of India. There was a rejection of what the British were trying to impose. Now, faced with this massive revolt against what they were trying to impose, in 1813, the Court of Directors in England asked the East India Company to please report on the working of our institutions in your areas. And you will be shocked to know the reports that were presented to the British Parliament. All these things are things that you can verify. You don't have to accept what I'm saying, but check them on the net. Now, Sir Henry Stachey, he was ruling over part of Bengal, and he reported that the judicial apparatus is not able to deliver justice. And he said things have become worse and worse. The channels of justice are choked, and the judges are burdened with the amount of business that they have to undertake. And he said that the establishment of the judicial process has completely collapsed. And I'll give you some figures which seems very familiar to us today because we've inherited that system and continued that system. He pointed to one problem that was prevalent everywhere, and that was overcrowded jails. So he says that he gives the example, and these are figures that he quotes, in the 24 Parganas, 209 prisoners were kept in confinement only on suspicion of that they have done something wrong, and they were kept in confinement for as long as 5 months without even being examined by a magistrate. This seems very familiar with the stories that we hear today, that people are jailed and they don't get a hearing for so long. And he gives the example of Arwal. There, 62 people were arrested on suspicion of a robbery. Of these 62 people, 9 died in jail and none was convicted on trial. So imagine they're kept in jail, so many die, and nobody is found guilty when the trial takes place. Another place, Dongyan, 84 people were arrested for theft, and of them, only 2 were found guilty. In Mudanpur, 192 persons were arrested after a burglary. 46 died in irons. They were chained. They died in irons. They were detained in iron chains for over a year. 3 died, and the rest were proved innocent on trial and acquitted. So this kind of terrible reports that we get on the functioning of the British judicial system comes from all parts of India. But I have to say that while these reports were coming, there was a group of British officials, especially in the Madras and Bombay presidencies, who said this system that we have introduced is collapsing, it has failed, and we should go back to the indigenous institution of panchayats and native judges. So this is the first part that I want to talk about. And now I come to education. And this education system, it's also a story of how the British destroyed indigenous institutions. Before the British came, we have 2 foreigners who visited India. One was an Italian nobleman, Pietro della Vella, and he came to India, and he is the first person to provide us with a view of what is called veranda schools or Tinnai schools. These veranda schools, they were open to everybody, and they were there in large parts of South India. So the first eyewitness account that we have of a Tinnai or veranda school is by Pietro della Vella. And the second account we have is by Father Bartholomew. He came to the Malabar region, and he is totally, he gives a detailed account, and he's totally shocked and surprised and overwhelmed with the kind of education system that he sees there. He says, first of all, he finds that education is open to everyone who wants to attend. It is free. And he says in Europe, education is so expensive, and over here it is free. And he says the boys come in groups in the morning, singing and so happy to be together in school. And then these are the subjects that are taught. And the subjects that are taught keep in mind the locality and the geography of that place. So Bartholomew writes that in the Malabar region, all students were taught navigation. They were taught how to man boats, because boats, there was such a surplus of water over there, and it was easy for communication. So children were taught how to do boating. They were taught all kinds of reading, writing, arithmetic, geography, algebra, everything they were taught. And it was always according to the need of that society. So the schools that were there before the British interfered, they were what is called one teacher school. All right. And the syllabus was almost the same, but certain features were added to particular areas. Now, in North India, these people write that among the tables that were taught was the table of a fraction. 1/4 multiplied by 2, 1/4 multiplied by 3, 1/4 multiplied by 4. We've heard of 2 times table, 3 times table, but this fraction table, why was it taught? Because the children, their families, all had a share in the village produce. You see, when the grain was harvested, then it was collected and everyone had a share. The village owner, the landlord, had the largest share, but everyone had a share depending on what his contribution was. So the poorest child, his fraction would be 1/4 of a mound or a mun, and if depending on how many hours his family worked, it could be 2 fractions, 3 fractions. So if the father passed away or something, then the child had to know how much of the grain he was entitled to. So these kind of very fascinating stories that we come across in India. And Bartholomew writes that no country in the world had followed their ancient usages and customs as the Indians. He said education included writing, accounts, grammar, fencing, botany, medicine, and navigation. And grammar was taught through Sanskrit shloks. You know, the students were taught Sanskrit shloks, and the shloks, from the shloks, they learned grammar. So, and you know, he gives a very interesting account. He says that the children, they did Shashtang Pranam when the Guru entered the school, and they were told that don't open your mouth while the Guru is talking. So these boys of 5, 6, boys are so full of life and they're so impulsive, and they normally get to speak when they shouldn't. So when the teacher would enter, they would put their hand on their mouth so that by mistake they don't say anything when the teacher is speaking. It is such a warm, happy environment that we get. The teachers, it's one teacher school, and the teaching is always done in the regional language. If it's Kannad's area, they will teach in Kannad. If it's Tamil area, they will teach in Tamil. So everywhere, this one teacher school teaching in the Kannad language. Now, what happened was that it is very surprising that the British tried to destroy the institutions. So what did they do? In the 19th century, the early 19th century, they told all their district officers, the district officers in every district, please submit a report on the state of education in your district, the number of schools, the number of students, what are the subjects taught, how is the teacher paid. So the most fascinating study is by A.D. Campbell. He was the district collector of Bellary. We've all heard of Bellary. So his report is available on the net, and I would encourage you people to read that report. It is so difficult to imagine that such kind of reports were produced in the colonial period. He gives the number of schools, the number of students. Most of them are boys. There are very few girls. And then he talks about what are the texts that are used, Ramayana, Mahabharata, grammar, and so many advanced texts that were written at some point in our history that taught to the students. And, when the school starts, then all the students assemble before a Ganesh Murti, bow before that, and then the school starts. So these colonial surveys are very important for us to know what we were and what we have become. And there was a chaplain, English bishop. One day he was walking to go to his school, which was a mission school, and there he found something that was absolutely astonishing for him. He found that one teacher, because every school was only one teacher school, so he finds that there is one teacher for the school, and the senior boys are teaching the junior boys. So if the senior boy is 15 years old, he is teaching boys who are 5, 6 years old. The teacher is keeping a watch on the whole school. And he realized that what a cost-effective way it is to teach. It will keep the community together and it will bear no cost to the state or the society. So this person takes this system back to England, where it is called the Madras School or the Monitorial School. So this colonial power, which tries to destroy our institutions, actually takes back what it thinks is most effective and introduces it in England. So I talked about the village boys being taught the fraction table. I also want to say that there was one particular region where women were given the highest education, and that was Bengal. Because the zamindars were rich people, and they were going to get their daughters married into zamindar families. Obviously, they will marry within their own circle. And given the high mortality rate, the zamindar father feared that if his daughter's husband passes away, then she has to be equipped to manage her share, to fight for her share, and to run that share. So that degree of pragmatism that was there as far as education is concerned is very evident even in places like Bengal. I'm not saying all the girls in Bengal were educated. No, many were educated at home, but people who received the highest quality of education were the zamindars who gave their daughters a very good education. So now the question is that what made the British undermine this education system, which was running so well? We actually all blame Macaulay. Macaulay is always blamed that, you're Macaulay Putra, etc. But actually, 35 years before Macaulay, there was another Englishman. His name was Charles Grant. Charles Grant was the first person who prepared a report which is submitted to the East India Company Court of Directors, saying that our education should aim at the Christianization and Anglicization of the country. Christianization means whatever, and Anglicization means English education. And he wrote a detailed report on this, which also you'll be able to find on the net. And he said that my wisdom tells me that within a few years of an English education, a Hindu boy will be totally detached from his culture. So, even now we are conscious of this fact. And he said, let us give English education and Christianization. That is the duty of the British if they want to continue their rule. And so this was the policy that was adopted, but many of us would not know how young boys in Bengal presidency they resisted this. And one example that I want to give you is a petition which was given by the boys of Bengal, and they consciously did not write it in Bangla or English, that they could all write it in Bangla or English, but they wrote it in Sanskrit. And this was a signaling to the British. And it was given in 1838 by the Hindus of Calcutta. And they told the British that, we have given you agrarian taxation. Whatever we produce from the soil, you take away. We have not taken anything in return from you, but we give you all the labor of our work. So this is what they say, and I want to say, they said that we only want to learn English for jobs. It's not that we accept your culture, we need jobs, and in today's environment, only English can give us jobs, so we only want to learn that much English as can give us jobs. We don't want to learn anything more from you. And they said that it is offensive of you to try to do away with the language and literature of this country and replace it with those of England. Now, these are young boys. India at that time had lost power in Bengal to the East India Company. But imagine the commitment and the courage of these young boys who write to the governor in Sanskrit. They were students, they knew English, but they wrote in Sanskrit so that the English get the message that don't try to deny us our tradition. And when the missionaries, they tried to establish English colleges or schools, and the first was in Calcutta. So the Alexander Duff was a Scottish missionary who came, and he established an English school, and he said, I will teach the Bible in my school. Now the Indians only wanted to learn as much English as they could to get a government job. So when Alexander Duff begins the first class in his school with the Bible as the text, one student, it's of a country which does not have political power, and this is what he says. After a pause, a young man of Brahminical caste started up and with some degree of animation cried out, Sir, I do not want to read anything against my own religion. I don't want to read anything of yours. I don't want to become a forced Christian. And then, so imagine, that nationalist sentiment that was not taught to them, it was part of their upbringing, their culture. It is because they were still rooted in their tradition. And Alexander Duff is really surprised at this kind of outbreak, and he tries to pacify the boy, and he calls the parents, and gradually, he persuades the parents not to withdraw their children from the school. But so many parents who write at that time, they say, we only want our son to learn enough English to get a government job. We don't want anything more. We don't want him to become an expert in English. So this is the kind of, rootedness in the ethics, the culture and tradition of this country that young boys had the guts to get up and tell a British officer, representing the might of the British, that we don't want to learn anything. So when the parents went on complaining, then the British government stepped in. And what did the British government do? It is something so devious that only they could think of it. They said, these people don't want to learn our religion from the Bible. So what do? We will teach English literature to the students, because through English literature we can bring our own tradition, customs and religion. Have you understood? If we don't bring in the religion, but we bring in English literature. So with that English literature, we will be able to achieve what we have done. So what I want to say is that it's important for us to remember and recognize the spirit and the valor of young Indians of that time, and how when the world has changed and it has changed so much in our favor, we need to remember those people and we need to learn from them. What is it that we need to learn? Every school was a school which taught in the regional language. So in the beginning, it is important for a child to be taught in the regional language, because that makes them very firmly rooted in their culture and tradition. And after that, when they go to higher classes, they can switch to a medium of instruction that they want. We are not denying anyone the right to remain in touch with the advances in Western education, Western science, technology, but to keep the generation from forgetting their roots. It's important that we first give them an education in the vernacular customs and traditions. When young, helpless boys had the courage of conviction to get up and stand before a white man, a powerful white man, how can we surrender that heritage when we are now a free nation? So I'll stop over here. Thank you for the patient hearing.
Thank you, ma'am, for your insightful words. I would now request Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe to kindly come up on stage. And ma'am, we would also like to hear your thoughts on the subject, and then you can carry forward the discussion. Thank you.
First of all, thank you, Professor Jain, for such a fascinating talk. And I want to begin by extending my heartfelt thanks to Mimamsa Foundation, as well as Dr. Akshay Ranade, Dr. Samhita Joshi, for inviting me here and be a part of this particular talk. It also gave me an opportunity to read those two books which Professor Jain has written. And she actually divided her speech also in those two parts. One is on the judicial institutions and the other is languages and educational institutions in India. So it was actually a very great pleasure for me to read the books as well as to listen to Professor Jain here. And in a way, it is an interesting thing that this particular topic was discussed today as part of the Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture. Because, you know, when initially in his opening remarks, Dr. Akshay Ranade has spoken about Justice Ranade's contribution. But there is one thing which probably links Justice Ranade and the historians like you, madam, is that Ranade was among the very first generation of, should I say, historians who used writing of history as an instrument of nationalism. And his book, The Rise of Maratha Power, is an exercise, as all of us know, in that direction. So it's a great coincidence, you know, and it's a pleasure that we could link the two things together. You know, when I was reading the two books, it was quite fascinating because Dr. Meenakshi Jain has neatly divided those things in especially two different centuries. So as she rightly spoke in her talk, the 17th century is primarily about the British and the other European scholars or European rulers or European travelers coming to India And they speak about Indian institutions with some kind of reverence. There is some kind of appreciation as well of the Indian institutions, both judicial, educational, language, and so on. 18th century, however, changes. And during the 18th century, as we can see, there is the tone changes from appreciation to criticism. But it's also a fact that, even during the 18th century, there are debates among the British, as she has rightly pointed out. And these debates among the British rulers of this country, particularly the East India Company officials, and they're mainly about, the diversity that India has, and that the diversity which was being evident even at that particular time. So what she brings out very clearly is the diversity that one can see in the North as reflected in the efforts that are made by the rulers in Bengal, the East India Company officials in Bengal, vis-a-vis, in particular, the East India Company governor in Madras at that time, finding it very odd that, certain things which are, which the Bengal people found do not exist. And it's not only regional, but she, brings out the diversity in terms of customs which vary from caste to caste, which vary from region to region. So, see, this is the beginning as such, of this entire discourse that she has developed through the various books. I would actually like to begin by asking you a slightly different question, and that brings me to your other books as well. I mean, I have read a couple of other books that you have written. The one is on Sati, the other is on Ayodhya and Rama as such. And, my first question in this respect is, see, we actually see a kind of, you speak about colonial writers who have tried to demean our institutions. These were the British, these were the Europeans. But in the 19th century, there is another school which tries to look at the Indian institutions in a very similar way, and that is the Marxist school. This continues even after independence. So there is in fact, there are two questions which I want to ask you, and it'll be really, interesting to listen to you on it. One part of my question is, how do you see, or do you ever see, any parallels between the colonial and Marxist efforts? Because both, in a sense, are they emerge from the Western tradition.
This is a very, very perceptive observation, and I hope my answer does not surprise you or offend you. Let me put it that way. See, in the 19th century, India produced a galaxy of historians, each one more formidable than the other. I can mention G.S. Sardesai, since we are sitting over here, Jadunath Sarkar, A.S. Altekar, and there were a whole lot of them. And I use the term nationalist historians for them. And when I use the term nationalist historians, I have to clarify that being a nationalist historian was not a pejorative term. Nationalist historians did not try to suppress any fact, and they did not try to distort. They wrote history as they saw it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. But they were nationalist historians. Nationalists because they did not distort. Now, at some point, what is called the left group of historians comes into the forefront. And the first important Marxist historian I would mention is Muhammad Habib. Muhammad Habib was the father of Professor Irfan Habib. I'm sure all of you know that. Now, what, apart from the fact that Marxist school of historiography talks about economics as the motivating factor in history and not religion and culture. So that is one important diversion. But why did the Marxist school take birth in India at a particular juncture in Indian history? And that is because the country was facing partition and there were tensions between two communities. Now, partition happened. It is also a fact that the majority of those who voted for partition did not go to Pakistan, they stayed back in India. This is not something that I'm inventing. So many works have been done on that. So, when a country has been divided along religious lines, I think we are very clear that the country was divided along religious lines, and majority the people who voted for partition did not go. So this group of historians felt that they have to present a view of Indian history which says religion was never the motivating factor in Indian history. What was the motivating factor in all history was economic forces. And Muhammad Habib wrote a very small book, but a very influential book, which became standard reading in the universities in North India. The title of that book was Sultan Mahmud Ghaznavi. Now we have just celebrated a grand revival of the Somnath temple. So the question is, why did Muhammad Habib write this? And what did he say in this? His main thesis was that Mahmud Ghazni was not a religious warrior. He was motivated, and I'm quoting, by the greed of a robber. Chor hota hai na? The greed of a robber, and that is why he attacked India, because he didn't want to wage a religious war, he wanted to be recognized as the person who denuded the temples of their wealth. So the leftist school, which had its base, if I can put it to start with, at Aligarh University, so they downplayed the role of religion in Indian history, in the world also, but we are talking about India, and they said that religion had no role to play, and it was economic factors that determined history. So, after independence, it is fortunate or unfortunate that at least in North India, the universities fell into the hands of leftist historians, and the books that they wrote on India became the standard readings in the universities. So what was the result? The result was a demeaning of Indian tradition, a demeaning of the importance of temples, and a demeaning of Hindu culture and Hindu civilization in the loose sense of the term.
Yeah, so I'll take it from this discussion. You say that writing of history was dominated by a certain school of thought. And right. But you have also mentioned the way you have learned history in the schools and colleges. Probably the experience of many of us will be similar here, at least to those who belong to my generation or maybe the generation before. My question, therefore, is when somebody starts writing a history which is different from it, what kind of difficulty one faces in this respect? And would you like to elaborate upon your own experiences in this connection?
Yes. As ma'am said, my teachers at Delhi University, JNU, were the leading Marxist scholars of that time. They are big names even today. So imagine I'm studying history, which I'm learning from them, and my mind is actually captive. They are controlling my mind. and I don't know anything different. But then what happens is that there is a general awakening in the community. And for whatever reasons, I began to study the Ram phenomena. Who is Ram? When did his worship begin? When did temples for Ram begin to be made? And in the course of that study, for the first time, I discarded my Marxist education and associated with the ancient tradition of this land. And it is so tragic because I read everything that I could. And I'll give you the example of a professor. She wrote a book, which I have, which said that Ram worship began actually in the 2nd century. She's written a full thesis. And when she went to the Allahabad High Court, she says there is no evidence of Ram worship before the 18th century. So I said, Madam, your book is published. I have a copy of it. And you are saying in that book, Ram worship is 2nd century, and in court you're saying 18th century. So these are some kind of learning lessons that I realized that this group, they may be scholarly, but they're not honest to their creed, to their profession, and to the subject of history. And I don't want to, step beyond the boundary, but I am convinced over the decades that I've spent in reading that their attempt is totally unsympathetic to the indigenous civilization and culture, and wherever they can stab it, they will stab it. But the only good thing which I have to mention is that, the left historians who were dominating when I was studying, many of them have passed away. Many of them are very old and they're not so active. But their students, who have also become professors, now don't have the courage to take on the civilizational battle. So they now study port history, economic history, etc. They are focusing on economic developments rather than on civilizational issues which have been so important for India, and they misled the country for so long. The Allahabad High Court and the Supreme Court said to these people that we have called you to assist us, but we find that you're deliberately trying to mislead us. What can be a bigger shame than this?
Once again, continuing with this thread as such, and probably this may sound a repetitive question, but I still want to ask that. The books that, at least some of the books that you have written, like Sati, for example, people probably have accused historians like you, not specifically this particular book, but many people,
Yes.
and the accusation is of revivalism, of conservatism. But I think there is a difference between being a revivalist and clearly finding out the facts, opening whatever is not studied so far, and putting it across.
And I always tell the audience, wherever I'm talking, please don't accept what I'm saying at face value. All the information is there on the net. I would request all of you to check it, because I'm not there to guide your mind. I'm there just to present this before you, and you have to do your own homework and come to your own conclusions. That's what I've always said.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important, not only a comment, but probably a lesson as a historian that you have given. I'll try and take it a little further, from these questions regarding schools of historiography and so on. When reading your books, but also otherwise, if one is not even a great student, but a serious student of history, 17th century colonial appreciation, 18th century colonial criticism. Yes. But then there comes a time, particularly in the year 1858, when there is Queen's Proclamation, when the British tried to do something else because they connected the revolt of 1857 to whatever they had done, the company rule they had done to the Indian society as such. And that is why the Queen's Proclamation very clearly announced that the Queen's government, that is the British Parliament, will not interfere in the religious and other practices of the Indian people. And the government, in fact, the British, who had been very active in passing laws towards social reforms in India until then, actually did not pass a single law for at least 3.5 decades after that. I mean, what comes probably as the only law in the period after that is the Age of Consent Bill. So, somewhere there was a dilemma for the British between the criticism and let us say a deliberate effort to undermine Indian institutions on the one hand, and political expediency on the other hand. Would you like to reflect something?
Yes, what you have said is very apt, but I want to draw your attention to the fact that after 1857, the British consciously tried to create inter-community divide. And in 1905, at the time the Muslim League was founded, and within a decade of the Muslim League founded, they established separate electorates for that community. So, I may be sounding too critical of the British, but I feel that they played a very important role in the divide and rule policy. Separate electorates, at that time, nobody could imagine that a government which was not under any pressure was giving separate electorates, and the only reason was to break the Hindu hold on power. So what you say is right, but this separate electorates is, there are so many speeches that are available by Sayyid Ahmad Khan. And in those speeches, he says that 1885 the Congress was established, and they invite him to be to the Congress because they said it should be a party for all. But in next year, Sayyid Ahmad Khan goes and gives a speech. That speech has to be read by everyone because you will understand what was the driving force behind the partition. He said that we will never accept the Congress. We will set up our own national body. And if the Congress thinks that they are numerically strong, they should remember that across the border in Afghanistan, our Pathan brothers are there. And if we just call them to help us, they will come running to help us, and rivers of blood will flow. That is a speech given by a very prominent leader of the Muslim community. So, what I will just say that history is very complex. We have to try to incorporate as many viewpoints as we can.
Probably this is the last question from my side at least. You have reflected upon it during your speech, but I still want to, ask that question. And that is about the diversity of customs, which was ignored by the British, especially those who were. What I particularly want to ask is, since we continue with the same legal and judicial system in India today, can we also relate the mess, particularly in some of the judicial decisions which have come up in last 10-15 years, for example, Shabrimala and other decisions. Can we relate it to those?
But what is happening? From what I can understand, society is beginning to push back the institutions it feels are not doing justice to it. Now, Shabrimala, they have not got the redress that they wanted. It's a custom which is centuries old. And what is so criminal about saying that women below a particular age cannot enter the shrine? It is the deliberate attempt to cut off our roots with our tradition and to show that tradition in ridicule. But what I find very heartening is that whatever the courts may decide, it is not for me to comment, but the society itself is protesting and pushing back. I don't know if any of you are aware of this controversy about lighting a lamp on Madurai Hill. And this is a custom that is centuries old. And how will lighting a lamp on the hill be a threat to any other community? But that pushback, and the people who are devotees of Murugan are going and dying but fighting for that right. The only problem is that the other side is equally rigid. But I find that there is a general reawakening in the wider Indian society, and the young generation are becoming so familiar with their ancient heritage. They may be of any discipline, they may be science students, but they are getting so familiar with their heritage, and they are, making small videos. Their local customs in their particular village. They will make videos. We worship this deity on this date. Small videos. So a revival of a civilization which is been under threat for 1,000 years cannot happen in 100 days. But I'm very confident. My study of history gives me hope that we shall overcome and we shall triumph. Thank you.
I would like to close this interactive session by just a few remarks. Professor Meenakshi Jain and the likes of her, they normally tend to bring out the need to revisit history, the need to revisit the colonial, the so-called Orientalist, Marxist, or various other perspectives through which histories of different societies, not just Indian, histories of different societies are written. This re-examination or reinterpretation of history is not necessarily revivalist, nor is it necessarily conservative. What we need to understand that it is consistent, in fact, with the broader trend worldwide, the broader trend of what is known as post-colonial, postmodern, and the so-called nativist, I don't like the word, but that is the word that is actually used. So so-called nativist approaches to interpreting and writing history. So thank you, madam, for answering the questions.
Thank you so much for taking time out and asking so
entirely
many
my
pertinent
pleasure
questions.
and privilege. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, audience.
Thank you so much for this wonderful interaction. I am sure that the audience will be eager to ask their questions, and we will try to take as many questions in the limited amount of time we have. Please make sure that you keep your questions pointed and concise.
First of all, thank you so much, ma'am, for your wonderful speech. My question regarding the Dravidian concern or Dravidian ideology. It might be ignorance of my own with respect to the facts. Whoever is worshipping Hindu god or goddess, we look at them as Hindu or Sanatani. But specifically Dravidian ideology, I don't know what exactly is the history behind it, and why, even if the chief minister's son speaks about eradication of Sanatan, they get selected in a Hindu majority state. The question is not political. I just want exactly the historical background of Dravidians. Thank you.
It's a very complicated question. I have to confess that I have not done enough research on this, and it will not be correct for me to offer my opinions on a subject on which I have not done research. You are free to ask me questions on which I have written books. Maybe a year later I'll be able to answer your questions, but at the moment I'm quite ignorant about this. Only take 3 questions, so one is over.
2 here in the front, they had raised their hands.
Madam, thank you so much for the very illustrated views. But one thing which I wanted to put across, that the studies on the history and the politics cannot be divided into two. They go along. So when one way, I'm very happy that you have brought out that our historical awakening or traditional awakening is taking place. But how do we link it with the political awakening, which is becoming a need of the hour? Can you
See,
reflect on that?
yeah, but I think that the political awakening is reinforcing the civilizational awakening. Can you imagine the outpour of sentiment for Somnath 2 days ago? If you look at the social media, everybody is full of enthusiasm for Somnath. And 50 years ago or 70 years ago, when there was a talk of rebuilding the temple, what was the response of the political leadership? It was so negative, so dismissive. And now the political leadership is going in the forefront and enthusiasm. You know, people get enthused by their popular political leadership. I think it's a very encouraging sign. Now, last question.
Thank you, ma'am. I heard what earlier that again one point I want to seek your view is that right from after the First World War, Russian Revolution, subsequently Second World War, when the Marxist Communist Party was formed in between 1920s and so, the interpretation of history or a rewriting of history from Marxist perspective is not something which is done out of the blue. It is intentional.
Absolutely.
Because a Marxist ideology,
Yes.
there the expansion, because after the Second World War, many of the countries turned towards Communist Party rule. So where the India was a stumbling block, because they said that China was again, it came under the communist rule. They said that unless India, so they deliberately, this is a design where they, from 1930s onwards, the historians or the so-called self-styled historians, not only they deliberately interpreted or misinterpreted history from the Marxist perspective, because they wanted to weaken the traditional base of the Indian society.
Absolutely, I agree.
So I think that's
No,
what
I agree with you.
Yeah.
I agree with you. My only addition
Yeah.
is that the Marxist rewriting of history was closely linked with political developments in the country. That's all that I'm saying. Thank you.
Thank you. We will close the Q&A session here itself as we have a positive time. So the discussions have ranged from a lot of various topics and we have covered a broad spectrum of ideas here today. One thing that I will myself take with myself today after this evening is that we need to relook Indian history with Indian eyes and through Indian sources. As we conclude this evening, I would like to call upon Dr. Samhita Joshi Ranade to deliver the vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sia. Respected dignitaries on the dais, esteemed invitees, and everyone who is sitting in the audience. As we come to the close of 5th Justice Ranade Memorial Lecture, it is my pleasant duty to propose a vote of thanks. First and foremost, on the behalf of MFIS, I extend my deepest gratitude to Dr. Meenakshi Jain for delivering today's profound and thought-provoking lecture on Colonial Reset, How British Rule Undermined India's Indigenous Institutions. Her scholarly insights and deep engagement with India's civilizational history have greatly enriched our understanding and provoked meaningful reflection. Thank you, ma'am, for accepting our invitation, coming here to Pune and engaging with all of us. Thank you so much. We are grateful to Dr. Umakant Das, Vice Chancellor of Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics, for gracing this occasion. We are equally grateful to Dr. Uttara Sahasrabuddhe, who has traveled from Mumbai and very expertly moderated this entire discussion. Thank you, ma'am, for having incisive questions and thoughtful responses. Added depth and balance for deliberations. Yes, ma'am, I will, yeah. We are grateful to our mentors for always supporting and guiding us for every initiative that we take under MFIS. So thanks to Dr. Prasad Joshi, Dr. Manjusha Gokhale, who have come here and graced this occasion. We sincerely thank to Gokhale Institute of Politics and Economics for graciously providing this venue and help us in hosting this particular lecture at Kale Hall. Our appreciation also goes to institutional authorities and all the cooperation and technical assistance that they have provided us. Thank you. Just ma'am, two more thanks are due. Because it's truly a pleasure, because to make this kind of program to happen, it takes many people and their hands to organize these things. So it's my duty and at the same time pleasure to extend that. To the organizing team and everyone who have volunteered for this program, please give a round of applause for everyone, to Sharay, Chintan, Pooja, Sia, Arya, Akshay, and everyone. Last but not the least, not at all the least, a warm thank you to participants and members of the audience who joined us this evening and contributed to their attentive presence and insightful questions. Thank you. And finally, we remember Justice Ranade, whose in memory this lecture series continues, and it continues to inspire us for critical inquiry and public thought. And so with this, I once again thank to each and everyone who are present here and who have helped in organizing this program directly or indirectly. Yes, absolutely. Let me give some last thoughts on this, that each and every lecture or each and every academic engagement that we have is a kind of a sandalwood, it's a kind of a chandana. The insights that we get are with us forever. So thank you once again to everyone for gracing this occasion. And as ma'am said, that her books are there outside the hall. You can visit the bookstall there. And we also have information of MFIS put up there. So if you want to join us, if you want to visit our website, do scan the QR code therein and do visit to the bookstall of the books written by ma'am. So, okay, so with this, I take your leave and over to you, Sia.
Like ma'am said, the bookstall is available outside and you can scan the QR code to gain more information about Mimamsa. We would like to end this session with a melodious rendition of the Pasaidan. It is the concluding verse of Sant Jnaneshwar Maharaj Jnaneshwari, which is a universal prayer in welfare, peace and happiness of all living beings.
Taya Satkar
we end the program on this note, let the Pasaidan serve as a reminder for all of us to reflect on these values and carry the spirit of unity, compassion, global well-being in our daily lives. Thank you and Shubharatri. The book signing will be happening outside in the passage. The book stall is there and the QR code will go.